Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. My name is Bob Sanders. I'm the Director of Sales at Shouldice Designer Stone here in Shallow Lake, Ontario. If you don't know where we are, we're a couple hours, I guess about 2.5 hours northwest of Toronto. We're right between two bodies of water, Lake Huron and Georgian Bay. I'd like to welcome everyone for joining us, from wherever you're tuning in. It's much appreciated. Today's webinar is Creative Minds, Trends and Innovations in Stone Veneer and Architecture in 2022. And it's proudly presented by Shouldice Designer Stone. This is our very first webinar. I've done lots of presentations, lunch and learns, conventions, trade shows, kind of now that they're back, and other like events, but really excited about this opportunity to do a live webinar and hosting it for you. Our audience today is varied across the building industry, from trades, masons, to various supply, to designers, to architects, to developers, and we're very happy to have you all join us today. I wanted to touch on our agenda and let you know how we're going to lay this out. We'll do our very best to stay within the time allotment. In our first section, shortly, I'm going to introduce our panelists. We're very excited to have Emilio Raimondo join us. I'm going to chat a little bit about Shouldice. Some of you will know our company and some of you may not. We're going to talk about the history of stone and working in a creative industry. And in our best practices, we're going to talk specifically, technically about concrete masonry units. And we're going to bring in Mike Gibbons from our company. Mike oversees quality control and research and development. And Mike's been with us for 37 years, so he brings along years of experience. And so we're very much looking forward in section 2 to engaging Mike in this conversation. Then in section 3, we're going to talk about trends and innovations, mixing materials, colors. We're going to talk about products specifically to dimensions, sizing, things like that. We are going to move into a Q&A. And then we'll wrap it up. And so sit back and enjoy, and don't hesitate to chime in on any questions you have, and we'll touch on that shortly. But let's start with some introductions. I'm very pleased to introduce our guest panelist today, Emilio Raimondo from Raimondo and Associates Architects. Raimondo is celebrating 30 years this year with his firm, and he's worked in the Niagara region on projects of all scopes and sizes, from fire stations and regional housing, veterinary hospitals, et cetera, et cetera. And I'd like to introduce Emilio.
Good afternoon, Bob. Thank you. Glad to be here with you, Bob and Michael. As you've said, we've had a long history with Shouldice, and we certainly like the company and the products they offer. Specifically, your user-friendly veneer has come a long way, and we see very little difference in the qualities between natural stone and your stone veneer. I'm very happy to be here with you all, our colleagues across the country. It isn't every day that we're here with so many peers in this business. We had the opportunity to serve as president of the Niagara Construction Association here in wonderful Niagara in 2002. And we've always had been a perceived, it's interesting in terms of the perceived adversarial relation between the working environment. My father worked as a mason and a GC, and I've learned a lot in respect to those relationships. And we've made a point of working closely with our counterparts in preparation of mock-ups and quality control on site. Therefore, the expectation is set, and the result is a project that we can all take pride and joy in the accomplishments together.
Thanks, Emilio. It's great to have you on board with us today, and we'll have some fun doing this webinar. And one of the things is we popped in this slide. I'd sure like to get your comment on it. The first quote is, "It is legendary how architectural lectures can be incredibly boring," and the other one is somebody that's been in the news lately. I don't know why people hire architects and then tell them what to do. I'd like your spin on those.
It's interesting. I think today would be a great example. We're certainly going to try to keep this topic very light, and it's incredibly interesting. And I think certainly exploiting materials such as Gold Ice products in itself are far from boring. As a matter of fact, they certainly offer a dimension to architecture. Yeah, it's. I mean, Frank Gehry certainly. He's an interesting fella as an architect. I got to meet him once at University of Waterloo, and certainly, I think architects have to work closely with their clients and their colleagues and in team approaches, and exercise some of their creativity in creating a project that would meet one's expectations. So I'll
definitely, it's definitely a team approach.
Absolutely.
I'm going to show you a sky shot of Shoal Ice. This is our facility in Shallow Lake. I'm not going to go through it in detail, but we're all in this business together. And whether it's through the architect and the mason, the builder, somebody that creates the thought and the idea, and we're in the business of building structures. We make them beautiful, interesting, functional. And we at Shoal Ice Designer Stone, we live this stuff every day. And we're really happy to share some of these thoughts with you. And as we go along this webinar, and we're glad that you're here to join us. If you're unfamiliar with Shoal Ice Designer Stone, we sure like what we do. I think we've been known to be a little silly at times with how much we enjoy our work. The cool thing is this is our 75th year in business, and we are a third generation family-owned and operated business. That center photo there on the right in the white hat is the founder. That's Bev Shoal Ice. He started this way back in the late 40s, and second generation to his left is Rob Shoal Ice, and that's the first two generations. And we are based in Shallow Lake, as I said. It's just a small community. It's a great place. And one thing is that we are surrounded. We're just on the Niagara Escarpment, and we are surrounded by many of the natural stone quarries that you may be familiar with today. And so we do take inspiration from our surroundings, whether it's the quarries and our amazing access to the aggregates that we have. And we talk about our Shoal Ice top 10. And we live by these things. It's quality, it's service, innovation, it's reputation, it's family ownership, our raw material supply, it's the culture, our selection, Canadian owned, and our customers. Our third generation in photo 5 there, to the left is Brad Shoal Ice, and to the right is Steve Shoal Ice, and that is our third generation in our family ownership today. But I want to highlight two things. All of these are relevant to each other, but I wanted to highlight innovation and renovation. Innovation, when you look at 75 years, some innovation is out of survival, and some innovation is to stay ahead of the market. Some innovation is to be competitive in the market. We do our best to anticipate the needs of the market. We do lots of R&D, lots of experimentation. Sometimes there's 10 or 20 times of trying something before you eventually hit on that great color or the shape or the design. Things start as a concrete masonry unit, and it's amazing to this day what you can do with a blank canvas of concrete. But we listen to architects like Emilio, to developers, the homeowners. We listen to everybody along that path in developing a building, and we look at what's needed in order to satisfy, to solve a problem if they need a solution for something. So it could be anything from how it's packaged, working within the pressures of cost and time, on different ideas on how we create things. And we cross-reference with all through our divisions in the company to make sure we're satisfying all of that. And we've had some great innovations over the years that we'll touch on, and things that we're very, very proud of. And then we go into our reputation and innovation, and our reputation is utmost of the importance to us, and we try extremely hard every day to do our best for our customer. And again, that is from the end user to the architect, and how we are creating our products, satisfying the needs of the market and the customer, and just, at the end of the day, doing our best, working hard with a smile on, and trying to satisfy everyone. And so we ultimately create a good reputation in the marketplace, somebody that you want to do business with. In that reputation is, as I mentioned, a third generation family company. Funny, I look at that photo of the Cottage Life show in Toronto. Obviously, trade shows got parked for some time. It was sure fun to get back to that, and just to meet people again. And we've all learned how to do business in a little different way in the last couple of years. And then you go back into 1961 in a plowing match, the famous plowing match that pops up in Ontario every year. And that's not the very first trade show, but that's sure one of the early trade shows way back in 1961. And we deal with designers, developers, builders, owners, masons, all along the channel in developing building. And as I said earlier, we engage all aspects of our company in marketing and sales, manufacturing, our leadership teams, and all listening to the market and what's needed through innovation. And that's what gives us a great reputation within the marketplace. But before we carry on, I did want to address one thing. We often get asked, how's the product made? And sometimes, often at Lunch and Learns, somebody puts their hand up and asks that question. And it's simple in the way I present it. There's a lot more technicality behind it, but it is kind of like baking a cake. In some aspects, you create the recipe, and you have a mold, and that recipe gets put into the mold. Lots of cool things happen beyond that. It arrives into a kiln or into the oven, and once it's gone through that process, it's removed. So it is, if you wonder how it is in that manufacturing process, that's kind of how you can relate to it. There's a lot more cool stuff that goes on behind the scenes, but that's one aspect. I wanted to just a couple of housekeeping items. There's Q&A. You'll be able to look on your screen, and you'll note where you can chime in for some questions that you'll have. We will address those at the end of the presentation. For our architect friends, we are offering a learning credit through OAA certificate in this, and we'll touch on that near the end. There will also be a survey, which we'd love for you to chime in on this. We'd like to do more webinars, and we'd love to know your comments. We are recording this, that it will end up on our YouTube channel. And also there's a opportunity near the end. We'd like you to sign up for our newsletter as well. So we're going to move on to section 2 here, and we're going to touch on just a brief history of stone, working in a creative industry. And we're also going to touch on best practices, which is where we'll bring in Mike Gibbons. So we do work in a very old industry, and I look at the quarries that are around Shoaldice and just how many thousands of years old they are. But we work in an old industry, creating and building structures just out of the stuff of the earth. Some people refer to it as we take dirt and create some pretty cool things. We use what's available, the stones, the rock, the aggregates, and then they're crushed and mixed and remade. They're designed and then built in, and aggregate arrives in various forms into our manufacturing facility. It's been around for a long time. I mean, we all know that photograph, the parts of the Colosseum. Fascinating fact in this, it was built using marble veneer, and you can no longer see the veneer, but you can still see the holes in the structure from the original anchors to anchor the veneer panels to it. It's also concrete, made by the Romans during the Roman Empire out of cement and rubble stone. And they also played with various aggregates as we do today to see what works best in various scenarios. Technology, the basics are still there, but technology definitely advances those raw materials today. And Amelia, why don't you comment on this slide here?
Yeah, that's interesting, Bob. We had the opportunity a number of years ago to actually visit Petra. It's a wonderful place, but it's just amazing. Like, humanity has been constructing with stone since time immemorial. The qualities of stone have provided shelter and protection, have proven to withstand the test of time. I think in each of these slides, you'll note, certainly stone has been around since the Stone Age. We've coined it at the very beginning, and we've sort of huddled in caves that were comprised of stone. We've advanced humanity and created various edifices such as the Colosseum. I mean, I'd still like to perfect the mortar joints in Cusco, Peru. That's an amazing thing. But, the qualities of durability and as things advanced, the aesthetics, and I think mankind sort of understands the qualities and characteristics of stone, and in an eclectic manner continues to evolve its sort of realm in building, and it's a wonderful product. Yeah.
Well, Emilio, masonry continues to this day to be one of the primary building products, and from the manufactured world, this stuff it's concrete. It's great concrete until you make it into something else, until we get a creative mind that gets a hold of it, and it gets turned into something beautiful. And it all starts as a concrete block. It's baked in a kiln, a concrete block at its most basic. So what? I'm sure at times you might all think, what the heck is, can you do with a concrete block? I'm amazed every day what we can do with a concrete block, what we can do with concrete, whether it's color and profile and size. We often refer to ourselves as we provide solutions to problems that an architect may have, or a builder or a mason may have, and our life does start with a clean sheet of concrete. But we are working in a mind. We're working in an industry of very creative minds, and at Shoaldice Designer Stone and in our industry on a whole for millennia. Where we see the continuous innovation of what is possible. And from our point of view at Shoaldice, the technical information that we're going to speak about has been gathered for decades from current building codes, experience, input from installers, professionals like architects. and all of that plays very much into the design and application of our product. And Emilio, you've been using masonry for 30 years.
Well, our firm, this is our 30th year in business. I look back and I think, man, how time has it's flown by. We've been specifying use of various types of CMUs, forms of stone, in probably 70% of our projects. We certainly understand its benefits, its characteristics, and design opportunities it has provided. Most importantly, putting our clients ahead of us. Our clients have appreciated the characteristics of stone, and in your case, Shouldice products, specifically their long-term life cycle benefits. Very durable product.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, masonry, as I said earlier, it's still one of the main building products that exist in the industry. And it's up to our industry and companies like ours and architects like yourself, Emilio, to always push the envelope for new ideas, and whether it be colors, size, profiles, whatever that is. And we do all challenge each other within that. So let's move on to our best practices. And in this section, we are going to bring in Mike Gibbons, and we're going to address, we have several slides here. We want to talk technically about best practices for the installation of concrete masonry units. These are also things that we often get questioned about. And so these are very common things and items that are very important to be addressed. And if you have any questions on any of these specific, please send us a question and we'll address it towards the end. Mike, some of the things that we often get asked for, maybe on a weekly basis, is fire resistance. And we talk about in this slide. I'll read it for what it says here. For a basic understanding of the equivalent thickness, this example demonstrates the effective thickness with cord units. So we do talk about cord units, hollow versus solid. And then if you want to address, Mike, just what it means to be the thickness and versus the fire rating there.
The fire ratings are based on wall thicknesses and in this case, the solid thickness. Higher fire ratings can be reached by basically manipulating the products. So the hollow core unit you see here today is 53% solid. You can increase that fire rating on, say, a 190 hollow core by going to a 75% solid, which will increase your fire rating. Or you can go to a lightweight product in the same hollow core that you see at 53%, and that will again increase your fire rating. So there's different ways to achieve a higher fire rating in all aspects of what we produce today, whether it's standard concrete block or architectural. So it's very versatile in that way.
Yeah, and I think with the various building structure options out there, at the end of the day, with concrete block and masonry units, I think is why we get inquiries all the time about the fire rating for concrete products. The other thing that we often need to address or get asked about is crack control. And, causes of cracking, there's drying, shrinkage, temperature changes, there's restraint, differential movement, deflection, structural overload, the settlement. And, Mike, if you could address on, how we prevent cracking with, through control joints, et cetera. This is something that is very, very common.
It's one of the most common questions. Unfortunately, in the masonry world, a lot of the masons and or homeowners and designers do not like to see expansion joints. Mostly it's it's the appearance in the wall that they dislike, but at the same time, they can be hidden so that they don't overwhelm the building. A lot of the people installing don't understand where to place them. There's lots of tech documents out there, whether it's best placement is inside corners, for instance. If you have an inside corner on a building, that's a perfect place to hide a control joint.
Our next slide, actually, Mike, our next slide does. It's got a great reference of recommendation for control joints.
Yeah, there's lots of places that you can hide them. They're there, but maybe they're not as apparent to somebody walking by your home and say, "Oh, look at that big joint there. It's got a crack in it." Well, in most cases, that tells me that control joint worked. Another way to prevent control or cracking is horizontal wire, which in residentially, I would say probably 5% of the people out there use horizontal wire, but it is one of the best ways to control your cracking, especially if you're using multiple products on your wall, whether it's clay to concrete or concrete to steel, whatever the case may be. They all have different characteristics. They move differently in the cold and the heat. So everything you can do to prevent that is a plus.
Well, our next slide does talk about, the next few slides, actually, we do talk about differential movement and the marrying of various products together. If you could address that, Mike.
Yeah, a lot of people are concerned about putting concrete masonry units in this case, with clay brick or natural stone. The easiest way to get around it is slip planes, where you have your clay to concrete, you have slip planes, you have flashings, and in a lot of cases, again, the horizontal wire every 16 inches moving up your wall will help control those cracks, or not control them 100%, but will minimize them and make them almost non-noticeable. Adjustable ties are another good placement. Some people try to, they think because they're using horizontal wire or using ties, they don't have to use one, or they only use one or the other. For the price of those ties or wire does not outweigh the cracking. So please go ahead and use both. You'll find your home or your building much better structure for it.
Well, then we actually have the next couple of slides. We actually have some technical drawings where you have concrete masonry units and clay brick, and the recommendation of the places of joint reinforcement, wall ties, etc. Mike.
Yes, and the best place, if anybody listening is ever wondering where do I get this information, ASTM tech documents are a wonderful thing. You can Google them. Some of them you may, if you wanted to buy or get the information on all the ASTM specs, you would probably have to purchase it. But for the most part, you can get an individual tech document that will show you where to put a slip plane, where to put a tie, where to put your flashings, and it's just something. Once you get your hands on it, it will become field practice and become a normality in your day-to-day installation.
Well, even this slide here, these two slides are great examples of what typically happens where you are often marrying concrete with clay, and you may have a higher percentage of clay and a smaller percentage of concrete as a banding, or vice versa. You may use the clay as banding and use the concrete as the primary part of the wall, and no matter what, you're still addressing all of the different aspects in here of where your joint reinforcements and wall ties and things are.
Exactly, and in this slide they show you both the brick tie and the joint reinforcing on 16-inch centers, which can go either way. If that picture were reversed and it was banding of clay brick versus concrete CMUs, it would be the same installation practice.
So those are things that that we often get asked about, and our next one is it's efflorescence, and this is another very common aspect. And I know when I've had the opportunity to present at Lunch and Learns, this is another item that comes up very well, and people just curious why and how to prevent it. So, Mike, if you want to address that.
Well, the efflorescence is one of the major topics, mostly in residential, but in commercial as well. What causes it? Is it it's your product? What's wrong with your product? It's not the product that's causing it. Efflorescence is just basically soluble salts. So in the manufacturing world, if you are using water softeners within your systems, water softener is obviously high salt content. So you're putting the salts into your product when you manufacture it. At the job site, if they're using, again, in the larger centers, GTA, they're using water from a tap or somewhere wherever they can get it. Again, could have a high salt content. The only way to avoid it in our manufacturing, what we do is we bypass our water softening systems for anything to do with production to help reduce that salt. We don't use any salts in our production side of it. We don't use any salts in our yard. And where we do, we keep it away from any product that's been manufactured, because salt, even on the ground, when wet, can be absorbed or wicked into the product itself. So again, when you get it, when it's there, sometimes it's only on newly manufactured products, but it can appear. There's a lot of issue with FO on blacks that are produced at the wrong time of year. If you produce a lot of black products during the months of October to, say, April, there's a higher chance you'll have efflorescence within the skid that it's delivered on, just because it's bagged, it's getting condensation, and it's manufactured in the warmth, goes outside into the cold weather, freezes. The minute the temperature starts to go up, the product starts to breathe again and pulls all that effluent to the surface. The lime scum sorry, Bob, did you want to jump in?
No, go ahead.
The lime scum, very similar. People often confuse them. The lime scum is from the mortar itself. It's not so much the product. And as you can see in the bottom photo, you can actually see it bleeding from the mortar joints. A good way to stop this, and as you see in that photo, it's underneath the sill. In most cases, that's caused by no flashings under the sill, and it's a practice that a lot of masons do not do, but should, and that photo tells you why.
Well, you are right, because that's something that usually after the fact we're often asked, why is there efflorescence or staining and things like that, and our immediate go-to is obviously to look at if there's any flashings on there, and if you just want to just again address the importance and what the flashing does, Mike.
If you look at a typical building in the wall space, the amount of rain that hits that wall and runs down, hits the window and drives onto that sill. So that sill is basically taking every bit of moisture that comes down that wall. The product can only absorb so much water, and then it passes through. If it passes through without that flashing beneath it, it's just pulling all the salts and the lime down that wall. It's going behind the wall, and then it's forcing itself back out. The wall can only hold, and the product can only hold so much moisture, so it's got to find a way out. The easiest way for water to get out is through the mortar joint. So with that flashing under there, what that does is that allows the sill to still become saturated, but also allows the water to release, come out the bottom, hit that that nice flashing, runs away in a drip, and then does not hit the rest of the building on the way down the wall. It's forced out, say, a half an inch from the wall, which helps keep the bottom of that wall dry.
And Mike, on the address the importance of the weepers and where you're spacing them out.
Weepers are one of the most important things, and a lot of times you'll find in the residential market, especially in this case, if you see that photo, they have built the wall properly, but now someone's come along and they've laid paving stones or what have you in the bottom, and they've stopped part of that weep hole. Instead of being a 3 or 4 inch high hole, now it's 1 inch. So that contains the water that's running down that wall. All masonry absorbs water, but it also releases water. But it can, once it absorbs to its maximum, the water penetrates that product, runs down, and needs an escape route. And the only escape route for that water is out those cell vents or weepers. If the water cannot get away, essentially, in our climate especially, it'll freeze, and that's when you start to have product deterioration because the water has nowhere to go, so it just holds in that wall.
Mm-hmm. If anybody has any questions, because we could sure go on and chat about some of the technical requirements and challenges that occur in the design. But if you have any questions, please refer to your section on your screen where you can chime in and ask a question. And Mike's going to be sticking around for those questions if we need anything to address near the end. But much appreciated, Mike, and we'll chat with you soon.
Thank you.
We're going to move on into our next section. And we're going to talk sort of a bit of a segue. We're going to talk about mixing materials, talk about colors, and we're going to address various concrete masonry unit dimensions. So as I mentioned earlier, with the history of stone, there is a long history of building things. And the previous section, touched on the health and safety, the technical aspects. But none of that talks about the style, and we are human. We care about more than just the function. We all dress and present ourselves in creative ways, how we feel comfortable being in the world. And our industry is no different. This is a very creative business that we're all in, and we notice things come in and go out of fashion. And these are just, some of the things that we've noticed on, various trends on mixing material, both residential and commercial. So, back in the day, we used to provide the masonry for the entire project. It was not uncommon that masonry, and it's not that it doesn't happen today, but it was not uncommon that stone and brick just wrapped all 4 walls. And year by year, we've tend to see more wall space being covered with other kinds of siding materials, whether it's glass or siding, stucco, steel, cement boards, things like that. And, we're in a time of very contemporary styles, and it's mixing the use of various materials. And Emilio, you will see this every day on how to blend. You want to make that building stand out, and how to blend various products.
I think you've kind of nailed it on the head, Bob. I mean, today, and part of the creative process is certainly as designers, architects, we look at use of diverse materials. You mentioned glass, siding, stuccos. I think the key factor and the key ingredient is that CMUs, and certainly in our experience with Schuldeis, is they're very complementary. So in essence, whatever materials you may choose, the use of CMUs can be used in a manner that's complementary. And there are a number of factors that certainly influence, I think, as designers, architects, the context, conceptual issues, client preferences, location, etc. But it's interesting. I think the key is stone, your CMUs in terms of Shouldice, we found are very complementary in when we mix in with other materials. And doing so.
Yeah, and I think that much of this we do see from the residential sector, where often designs and ideas can be driven, but very much these ideas are showing up in commercial buildings too. And whether it's a strip mall where you might have 3 to 4 courses of architectural block and then glass or something above that, to like a 4-story office building, you might see a mix of siding materials, mixed use of masonry, and the siding materials can be, can be wood, it can be steel, and all these companies are sort of following each other because we all end up on the wall together. And 15 years ago, we might not have had this conversation. Today, we all in a different way pay attention to each other, from styles and colors, because we all need to satisfy or have the solution from a problem that you may have, Emilio, in designing that wall, and you want to marry various products together. And do you find, Emilio, it very inspiring when you have various products that you can use in different ways on a wall?
Absolutely, Bob. Absolutely. When you're looking at a building and you look at its components, and you sort of mentioned earlier in the presentation, sort of ingredients are a puzzle, right? And you look at the characteristics of the materials and you make determinations where they're best suited. And then within that realm, you look at the suppliers, in your case, say Shouldice, and you could review some of the textures, the durability of the product in terms of its use at grade level, and you make informed decisions, and you work through the process. And we found the CMU product line provides that diversity, and in doing so provides you a level of exploiting creativity. Yeah.
Well, we talk about the various materials, and then, some of the biggest challenges is addressing the trends in color. And, we're trying to match the colors of these other materials, as I mentioned. And, as I said, they're all having the same types of conversations. And, I'm going to get you to touch on this because this is, a collage of a lot of the different colors that we use together, and how we mix and match and blend and things like that. And maybe you want to touch, Emilio, on, we talk whites and blacks all the time, but how it's evolving even into other colors today.
Yeah, it's interesting. The color and texture have always been sort of a choice and preference, and as designers, they tend to evolve and get greater use, and they create what we call the trend. But personally, I really like the current color trends that are that are in the market today and are offered by various suppliers, including Shouldice. And I think these trends are here to stay. And the reason I think that is, or at least stay with us a longer period of time, is that they offer a diversity, yet I call it a more cautious neutrality in terms of tone. And in that, I think they're very complementary in uses of other materials such as glass and other siding materials. So I think these trends are here to stay for a while. I know, like any trend, we tend to move out in time, but I certainly believe the palette choices of color are quite well established. I think here to stay for a while.
Well, we're sort of in an era of some bold colors, bright whites and the mixed use of bright whites and deep blacks married together, on the same wall. And this is an example where we have our estate stone, in the Norton color, which is a rich black color with a light colored mortar joint. And then to the left of that is a Rockstone product with a tapestry banding and bullnose sills and the surrounds all in executive gray. So it's the same color, and using different profiles and and how you get the contrast of various things within that. But you did mention about you are starting to see browns and brown tones and things like that, Emilio.
Yes, but not, traditionally in the past, I would say, again, the tones are a little more subtle. So there's a mix of more kind of natural color, but there's a greater subtlety. And I think that's important. I think, again, my personal opinion may be the stronger, louder colors might sort of dissipate, but the sort of subtle earth tones are here to remain. Yeah. And the reason for that is they really become complementary to adjacent selections of materials or even landscaping that really become a cohesive approach to design.
Yeah.
And the subtleties, neutralities, I think are here to stay for a while.
Yeah, and there's, these are great examples. Our Estate Stone in the Roberval, which is a bright white, very bold, and where you're accenting it with other materials like the blacks, the trough, and the downspout and doors and things like that. And there's a photo there with our Rockstone and our tapestry unit in a gray pewter in Dover. And this is something that we had these colors, and it took the designer and the architect to mix and match our colors to create some very cool looking walls. And we create the colors, and sometimes it takes such as yourself, Emilio, to take those colors and those various profiles and mix use them and how they can stand out amongst the in the wall. And sometimes, it's a case of we're just trying to keep up with the Joneses on some things, and it can tend to be a balance of, sort of leading with colors and, talking about, listening to what's important with colors and how designers and architects take our product and create their own innovation and mix using them. And we're also very much into the contemporary style as well. And I know we have a slide just showing. Actually, if we can just hold this slide for a moment, if there's some tans and browns. But a very popular photograph that we have on the right there is just how to use the product, and how you can create it through a curved wall and, with different colors and profiles and things and ideas like that. The next one, still in some tans and browns, with our Estate Stone in a briar, the Rockstone utilizing a desert buff and antique bronze, and especially with that one on mix using the color and the profile and how it stands out on that. And maybe a good segue from these photographs to talk about trends in various unit sizes. And I said early on, it's amazing what happens with a clean palette of a concrete masonry unit and what you can do with sizing and color and things like that. And blacks and whites lend themselves to crisp lines, multiple heights, heights of maybe 2, 4, and 8 inch heights and things like that. Both are great within the residential and the commercial architectural world for design. This just sort of highlights an example of how products are utilized and how architects, designers, such as yourself, Emilio, will sort of redesign and that product into the into the wall and utilizing the different profiles. if you look at trends in texture where it has, rock stone in tapestry, this is often used to break up the wall. Not just colors, as we saw a photo a few slides back. It's not just the color, but you can also utilize the texture to have add contrast to that wall. And we provide a lot of different size units to be designed in, and from hollow units to solid units. And it's a great slide there that talks about a lot of these size units came out of collaboration with individuals such as Emilio that was looking for certain size units, and how we created certain molds and different things and profiles and how to address the needs, and always knowing that products of various sizes can be blended within the wall. Definitely can be blended in the wall today. Other innovations, that we talk about. Maybe Emilio, if you want to address, what these other innovations are and things that you look at the importance of when you're designing that structure.
Yeah, today it's interesting when you look at CMUs in general. I mean, I look back at it and say, we're finding greater comfort in what we call the term, tried and true, right? You've got a product, CMUs, that have withstood time immemorial. They're used today in a number of diverse means and methods. And I think certainly what's important and what you provided through Shouldice is some diversity in unit typology that can be used in very creative manners, right? I think in closing, like certainly today, building efficiencies, environmental stewardship, as noted in the slide, are very, very important. Concrete CMU products have been around for many, many years. Environmental stewardship is important. I suspect one direction might be to look at improving the environmental and carbon footprint of concrete products. I suspect that's something certainly Shouldice will certainly be conscientious of and move in that direction, because concrete products aren't going away. They have a great perception in society. They provide durability. They provide shelter. The perception of safety is there in concrete products. I think that would be certainly a trend to move forward as the planet becomes more conscientious of the carbon footprint. Right.
Well, on that. It's a challenge of manufacturers, especially in today's environment. You're not only trying to create a productive, efficient manufacturing facility, but you have to, you're very aware of environmental challenges and responsibilities. And we're very fortunate where we are to have such close access to our primary source of aggregate. And so that, it plays a role. It's only one aspect of the importance of, the carbon footprint. And, when it comes to concrete products, they have a lifetime of longevity. And, so when they're in the wall for as long as you want that product in the wall. But behind all of that is a lot of responsibility that takes place from manufacturing to design, to the installation, to the responsibility to the community. Communities all have official plans, and how masonry plays a role into their community, and whether it's concrete or whether it's clay, and the importance of it. Because with concrete products, it is a lifetime product. So there's very much a responsibility and from all involved in putting the best standards forward for that. So, and I know Emilio, you'll in anything that you design, you have to be aware, when you're designing even that local community, what their needs and what their requirements are to sustain that product and for the longevity of it.
I think that's a great point, Bob. Certainly in the Niagara region, we have a number of smaller communities. Niagara Lake, a good example. They're working to certainly design guidelines and contextualism, and I think CMU products certainly meet that requirement and their ability to be used in a contextual manner that's respective of design guidelines and even heritage, as an example. So I think absolutely there's a real need for this product. CMUs aren't going to go away, and they will continue to be used in creative manners that would address guidelines in that regard, as well as preferences, designer preferences and client preferences.
And I think, and just one last thing to touch on is we talk about through this presentation about collaboration, and the collaboration between the architect community and the manufacturer, the developer, the homeowner. We're all shooting essentially for the same goal. Whether you want your building or your home to look great, you want it to be to have a lifetime of longevity. You want it to be responsible in the environment. And so just like when we're looking for a new color or a new profile, the responsibility of how it's made and so on and so forth, it all results from the collaboration of all of us involved in creating that product. So I think it's great. Other innovations sometimes is not just about the product itself. So let's move on to our last section, which is our Q&A. I'll touch on the survey and the closing remarks. So have a look at, if you haven't chimed in yet on a question and you want to know how to do that and whereabouts it is on yours, this is a screenshot of that. So if you haven't taken a minute to familiarize yourself with the platform, look at the various tabs available it's on the right side of your screen, and you'll see the Q&A button. Please feel free to send questions in, and if you haven't any difficulties with it, you can also chat directly through our moderators. There is a live chat there, I believe, through the moderator chat, so please, we are getting some questions in, and we will address those. And also, please remember, after the webinar is over, we're hoping that you can, there's a short survey. We would really appreciate your comments on that. Gives us some good feedback on how to improve our upcoming webinars. And there will be a link on the final screen once the cast ends it'll bring you to that screen. So let's have a look at, we do have some questions in here. So one of them is, Mike, and I'm going to bring you in on this as well. What is the best construction method to mitigate stains on the stone due to dripping water or weathering? Now, this is, again, this is a great question, actually, because we do get this often, how to tidy up sometimes if stone gets dirty and things like that. So, again, it's what's the best construction method to mitigate stains on the stone due to dripping water or weathering? Mike, if you can address that.
A lot of the times you have to go to the source. It usually means a flashing issue somewhere. If that's not doable to fix after the fact, there are several products on the market that you can purchase that will remove stains, efflow, whether it's coffee, wood, tree sap. A lot of the companies out there, most of the bigger companies will have a chemical, some aggressive, some not as aggressive. You have to be very careful when you're into the acids, sulfuric acid versus muriatic acids. If you're not comfortable with that, stay with a green product so you're not to harm the exterior of your building by bleaching it, so to speak, if you use too strong of an acid product.
So, and I think especially, there's different aspects. If you have bright whites and things like that, if you have the blacks, sometimes where, on bright white, sometimes a staining or whatever may show more than the blacks. But there's applications for each on how to address it. And believe it or not, sometimes Mother Nature does look after, and how a wall is cleaned. And I know we often will mention that. There's another question here. Does mortar fill account for the equivalent thickness in fire rating, or is the rating based solely on the equivalent thickness of a concrete masonry unit?
The fire rating that we 20 centimeter standard concrete block is a 1.8 hour fire rating. That is based on the unit itself. The mortar fire rating can be achieved by using different types of mortar. There are, I believe, 7 or 8 different mortar types out there. A lot of times as well, the fire ratings can be achieved by behind the wall using airspace, drywall. There's different methods to achieve a higher fire rating, but you want to be sure the wall you're building is the wall that you want for your end structure. Meaning, is it a CMU masonry with drywall on the inside? Is there an airspace and then drywall again? Every one of those things add up to fire ratings. So they all have to be taken into account. But the mortar, there are different types of mortar that can be used to achieve a higher fire rating.
Mm-hmm. Another question here as well: is there any concern installing concrete masonry units at grade? I'll chime in as well, Mike, and maybe Emilio as well. It's we do get asked this often. Our product it's concrete. So, Mike, if you want to comment, we have nothing against or resistance against installing it at grade.
Yeah, there's no issue with installing at grade. The one thing that has to be taken into consideration prior to the installation is where is the grade coming to in respect to the height of the CMU? Is it blocking the weep hole vents, which is a no-no? Obviously, then you're trapping water in the wall. You can definitely use it below grade as long as it's maintained that any concrete or asphalt or whatever's up against that building, there needs to be a space for that water and salts, obviously, on sidewalks that can get away without being trapped against the masonry, because, again, you're just causing deterioration.
Emilio, is that something when you're designing a wall?
Yeah, and we've had very similar circumstances. I mean, traditionally, you maintain your 150 millimeters to the underside of your mud sill to your CMU unit. Depends on, again, the veneer type. You've got a fairly resilient compressed face, so you're not looking at a CMU unit that is very porous per se. And I think some of the technical requirements that were spoken of by Michael are very valid. And we have used them successfully at grade, but again, taking note relationship of pavement to the weep hole system. What we've done on some occasions, when you have, say, a pavement that it's close to, you can't actually achieve, say, the 150, we'll raise the weep hole one course. So we'll put mortar behind the bottom course and then put the flashing up one course with the weep holes, so we stay clear of the pavement area that would obstruct flow. Yeah.
Right. I have a couple of questions here. The one is back to the control joints. Mike, will a wall ever crack even with a control joint?
Definitely. Control joints are there to control where the crack happens. It's not there to say that it will never happen. There's so many variables on cracks, right down to the base below the foundation. Improper compaction will cause settlement in the foundation, which may not crack the foundation, but can crack the walls above it. So in a perfect world, we'd like to say that they will never crack, but there's too many variables involved.
I've got one more question here, and it says earlier you touched on blending concrete and clay products together. Is there any concern at all on blending concrete and clay together because of their various movements and shrinkage?
Not at all. As long as there is horizontal wire placed in the wall, the brick ties are properly placed. There's no concerns. They both, even though they both are different characteristics, one expands, one contracts. That's where that wire, and a lot of times they'll put that little slip plane, maybe a flashing in between them, so that both items can move in the different direction without causing any cracking.
Okay. Thanks, Mike. So that's all the questions that we have. I want to move on just for our architect friends that have joined us today. You can receive your OAA certificate. You can email us at marketing@shoaldice.ca, and we will complete the certificate and email it back to you. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us for that. And thank you so much. We appreciate it. We've enjoyed this opportunity to talk to so many friends in the building community. On behalf of all of us at Shouldice Designer Stone, Emilio Raimondo, Mike Gibbons, and myself, we would like to thank you for joining us for this webinar and a glance into our collective industry. We're glad to be working with you all in creating structures, big and small, across this country. We hope to remain a strong partner for years to come. Much appreciated, and please fill out the survey. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of the day.